I heard Eli before I saw him. His sneakers slapped against the sidewalk, and then he burst through my front door, pale and shaking. He locked the door behind him and grabbed the curtain to look outside. "What happened?" I asked. "There's a car," he said. It followed me. A dark sedan rolled slowly past the house, brake lights glowing red at the corner. Then it stopped. Eli said the car had been behind him for several blocks. It slowed when he slowed. It flashed its headlights when he jogged and followed when he ran. The sedan reversed and parked directly in front of the house. A man jumped out. Eli backed away from the window. The man ran up the walkway and started pounding on the front door. "Open up," he shouted. I pulled Eli down the hallway and told him to get into my bedroom. The pounding grew louder. The doorbell rang sharp and frantic. It didn't sound like a polite warning. It sounded like someone trying to force panic into the house. I called 911. I told her a man had followed my cousin home and was trying to get inside. She told us to stay away from the door and lock ourselves in a room. Then the pounding stopped. For 3 seconds, the house was silent. Then it started again at the bedroom window. Eli screamed. The man outside was hitting the glass with both hands, shouting through the closed window. "Stay quiet," the dispatcher said. "Do not engage with him." But then his words became clearer. "There's someone in your house." I froze. The dispatcher told me not to trust him. Not yet. She said officers were on the way. I saw him following the kid. He went around back. "Lock yourself in a room." Eli stared at me, waiting for me to decide if this man was a threat or a warning. Then we heard it. Glass breaking near the back door. Then came a soft scrape, a careful shift of weight, and footsteps on the kitchen floor. Someone was inside, not the man at the window. No else. I grabbed Eli and pulled him into the closet. I whispered to the dispatcher that someone had broken in through the back. She told me police were close, too close to hang up, too far to save us yet. Growled, patient. One door opened. It heard bass. Then another. The closet felt airless. Eli had both hands over his mouth to keep from crying. The footsteps stopped outside the bedroom. White did. The doorknob turned. I had locked it, but whoever was outside pushed anyway. Then came the first kick. The door shook. The frame cracked. The man outside the window started yelling again, shouting toward the person in the hallway. Whatever he said made the kicking stop. For a few seconds, all I heard was my own heartbeat. Then the footsteps ran away. The front door opened, it umbering. Then slammed. Police arrived moments later. They found the back door hanging open. The glass panel had been smashed. Nothing had been stolen. No drawers opened. No electronics touched. No wallet taken from the counter. The man from the sedan was still outside, hands raised, explaining before they even asked. He said he had seen Eli walking alone and noticed an older man moving from bush to bush behind him. Not just walking the same direction, hiding, following, watching. He said he flashed his lights to warn Eli without making the man bolt. When Eli ran, he followed to make sure he got home. Then he saw the figure slip into the backyard. That was why he had pounded on the door and gone window to window. He wasn't trying to get in. He was trying to keep us from letting the wrong person get close. My aunt and uncle drove through the night to pick Eli up. The police stayed outside for a while, and one patrol car remained near the curb until morning. Eli barely spoke. I didn't either. The part I couldn't stop thinking about was that nothing had been taken. The intruder hadn't come in for money or valuables. He had followed a 14-year-old boy home, waited for panic to pull everyone's attention to the front of the house, and then broken in through the back. I thought about the white van across from my old house, the cut marks under my living room floor, the fake children laughing in the forest, the red words on the cabin window that were wiped away before daylight. I don't know if these things were connected. Maybe they weren't. Maybe the world is just full of people who learn how to hide in ordinary places, in their houses, between trees, behind headlights. But I know this. When a sound stops the second you notice it, don't ignore it. When a vehicle appears twice for no reason, don't explain it away. When someone says there is another person inside your house, lock the door first. Then decide whether to believe them. Because sometimes the danger isn't the person making noise. Sometimes the danger is the one staying quiet. After that night, Eli changed. He didn't want to walk alone anymore, not even in daylight. If a car slowed near him, his whole body stiffened. My aunt put him in therapy, and for weeks, everyone treated the story like it had ended with the police report. But for me, it didn't end. Because 3 days after the break-in, I got a call from the officer who had handled the case. He asked if I knew the man who had warned us. I told him no. He said the man had given the name Daniel Mercer and a phone number, but the number was disconnected. The address on his ID belonged to an empty lot. The sedan he drove had been reported sold years earlier, but the current owner couldn't be found. That should have made me feel afraid of Daniel. Instead, it made me feel afraid of everyone else. Because if Daniel was lying, why did he stay until the police arrived? Why did he stop the person in the hallway? Why did he protect Eli? The police had no answer. A week later, I drove back to my old house to pick up some mail. The tenants were out, so I used my old key and checked the mailbox. Everything looked normal until I noticed a folded envelope wedged behind the side gate. There was no stamp, no address, just my name written in block letters. Inside were 3 photographs. The first was of my old house, taken at night from across the street. My bedroom window glowed faintly through the curtains. The second was of my family's cabin in Colorado. It was taken from the tree line, looking toward the back windows. The third was of Eli walking home that Saturday night. My hands went numb. On the back of the third photo, someone had written, "YOU. We're never the first." I called the police again. They took the photos, asked the usual questions, and promised to look into it. But I could tell by their faces that they didn't know what to do with something that sounded insane when said out loud. A white van outside one house, fake children laughing in a forest, a stranger breaking into another house, a mystery man who saved us, then vanished. It sounded like 3 separate nightmares stitched together by paranoia, but I knew they were connected. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat at my kitchen table with every light on, replaying the words in my head. You were never the first. Around 2 in the morning, my phone buzzed. An unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Then a message came through. It was a video. The screen was black for the first few seconds. Then the image sharpened, and I saw my old crawl space door. The footage was shaky, filmed from inside the darkness beneath the house. I watched myself appear at the opening with a flashlight. I watched myself lean in. Then the camera turned slightly, and for half a second, I saw the person filming. Not their full face, just their mouth, smiling. Then the video ended. A second message arrived. Daniel was late. I locked every door and sat with a kitchen knife in my hand until sunrise. The next day, I tried calling the officer, but he was off duty. I went to the station in person and showed them the message. They took my phone for evidence, gave it back, and told me to stay with family if I felt unsafe. That was all anyone could offer. Stay somewhere else. Leave another place behind. Again and again. I was tired of running, so I did something stupid. I went looking for Daniel. I started with the empty lot from his fake address. Nothing was there except weeds, broken bottles, and an old mailbox leaning sideways. But inside that mailbox was a single piece of paper, folded neatly. It had been left there recently. Written on it was an address. No name. No explanation. Just an address on the edge of town, near an abandoned storage facility that had been shut down years ago. I should have gone straight to the police. Instead, I drove there before sunset. The place looked dead. Rows of rusted units sat behind a broken chain-link fence. Most of the doors were tagged with graffiti. Some were hanging crooked. Wind dragged trash across the cracked pavement. At the far end, one unit had a newer lock on it. The number matched the paper. I stood there for a long time, listening. No footsteps. Jaw, laughter. Coo. No scraping. Just wind. Then, from inside the storage unit, a phone began to ring. Not a normal ringtone. The same one I used every morning for work. I backed away. The ringing stopped. Then, something knocked from inside the unit, right? 3 slow knocks. The exact same rhythm I had knocked on my bedroom wall the night I heard something moving inside it. That was when I finally understood. Whoever this was, they weren't just watching me, they were learning me. I called 911 from the storage facility parking lot and waited behind my car with the engine running. 2 officers arrived 20 minutes later. I showed them the paper, the unit, and the lock. They treated it like a possible stalking case, but I could hear the doubt in their voices. Until they cut the lock, the door rolled open with a scream of metal. The smell hit first. Damp fabric, old wood, something rotten underneath. Inside the unit were boxes, plastic sheets, broken electronics, and shelves full of things that did not belong together. A muddy portable speaker, a white van's rear view mirror, a child's blue backpack, a stack of printed photographs, and on the back wall, taped from floor to ceiling, were pictures of people. Just me. Not just me. Dozens of people. Some were standing in driveways. Some were walking alone at night. Some were photographed through windows. A few had red marks drawn over their faces. Near the center was a cluster of photos connected with black string. Here, my old house. The crawl space door. The broken glass from my back entrance. And Daniel. There were more photos of Daniel than anyone else. In some, he was standing outside houses. In others, he was watching parked cars. One photo showed him sitting in his dark sedan, looking exhausted, like he hadn't slept in days. He wasn't part of the game. He was hunting the person behind it. One officer pulled a cardboard box from the corner and opened it. Inside were small notebooks, each labeled with a different name. One had mine. My throat closed when I saw it. The officer put on gloves and opened it. Every page was filled with notes about me, my work schedule, my running route, the nights my sister wasn't home, what lights I left on, which windows I checked first. At the bottom of one page, written in red ink, were the words, "Subject hears scraping, responds to voice, fear level, acceptable." Another notebook had Eli's name. Another had Daniel's. Daniel's was different. The pages weren't just observations. They were warnings. Daniel interfered again. Daniel followed. Subject home. Daniel must be removed. A cold feeling moved through my body. "Look at this," one officer said. He had found an old camera in a box. The memory card was still inside. They plugged it into a laptop from the patrol car. The first video showed the woods behind the cabin. Night vision. The speaker sat on the ground, playing the sound of laughing children. Then a man stepped into frame, wearing a dark jacket and gloves. His face was covered. He stood there waiting. Then, from the side of the frame, Daniel appeared. The 2 men fought silently in the trees. Daniel grabbed the speaker and threw it away from the cabin. The masked man shoved him hard, then ran deeper into the woods. The camera shook and fell. The video ended. The officer clicked another file. This one was filmed outside my house the night of the crawl space. It showed the white van parked across the street. Then, Daniel's sedan pulled up behind it with its headlights off. Daniel got out and moved toward the van. The van drove away. A few minutes later, I appeared at the crawl space door. The masked man crawled toward me from under the house. Daniel came running from the street, but by the time he reached the side yard, I had already slammed the door and gone inside. Daniel wasn't late because he was part of it. He was late because he had been trying to stop it. Then the officer opened the final video. It was dated the night of Eli's break-in. The camera was inside my living room, inside, pointing toward the hallway. The masked man moved through the house while I hid with Eli. Then Daniel's voice shouted from outside the bedroom window. The masked man froze. For the first time, the camera caught his face as he turned toward the sound. I stopped breathing. The room tilted. The officer looked at me and said, "Do you know him?" I couldn't answer. Yes, I did. The face on the screen wasn't a stranger. It was my father, not my real father. My stepfather, Ron, who had been in my life since I was 6. The man who taught me how to shoot. The man who gave me the keypad code to the cabin. The man who told me I was right to leave because nothing in that house was worth my life. The man who had access to every place where it happened. The officers were still talking, but their voices sounded far away. Then my phone buzzed. Unknown number. A message appeared. It was a photo of Daniel. He was tied to a chair in a room I didn't recognize. His face was bruised, but his eyes were open. Below the photo was one sentence. Ichi was never saving you from me. Another message arrived before I could move. Ichi was saving me from you finding out. Then my phone rang. I didn't answer. The ringtone echoed from somewhere inside the storage unit. Not from my phone. From behind the back wall, the officers drew their weapons. One of them pulled away a hanging plastic sheet, revealing a narrow door hidden behind shelves. From the other side came my stepfather's voice, calm and familiar. "Son," he said softly, "you weren't supposed to see part 6. I grew up in a quiet town, the kind of place where people left porch lights on out of habit, not fear. The houses on my block sat far apart, and across the street was a thick strip of woods that swallowed every sound after dark. At the time, I lived in a small one-story house with my older sister, Maya. Technically, it was our place, but she was hardly ever there. Her work kept her traveling, and most weeks I had the house to myself. I liked it. I had a routine: come home from work, make dinner, shower, relax, go for a run, come back, eat something light, lock up, and sleep. One Thursday night, I came back from my run and noticed a white cargo van parked across the street, half hidden under the trees. That was strange. Hardly anyone parked on our street unless they lived there or were visiting someone. I slowed down as I walked toward my porch. Someone was sitting inside the van, but I couldn't see their face. The windows were too dark, either tinted or just black from the night. Whoever it was didn't move. They just sat there, facing my house. I told myself not to be dramatic. Maybe it was a contractor. Maybe someone was lost. Maybe it had nothing to do with me. Still, I locked the door behind me twice. Later that night, while I was watching TV, I heard a strange scraping sound outside. It was slow and rough, like metal dragging against concrete. I muted the TV and listened. Pause. I walked to the front window and looked out, but the yard was dark. I couldn't see anything except the trees and the empty road. "Hello?" I called through the glass. The scraping stopped instantly. That scared me more than the sound itself. I stood there for almost a full minute, waiting for it to start again. It didn't. Eventually, I convinced myself it was my neighbor doing something in his yard, or maybe an animal near the side of the house. I went back to the couch, but I didn't relax after that. The next day was Friday. I told myself I was tired, stressed, and making the whole thing bigger than it needed to be. After work, I followed my routine again, only earlier because I had plans with friends. When I got back from my run, I expected the van to be there. It wasn't. That should have made me feel better, but it didn't. It felt less like the problem had gone away and more like it was waiting. I showered, changed, and went out with a few friends to a comedy club about 30 minutes away. I got home late, exhausted, and half asleep before I even opened the front door. I locked up, brushed my teeth, changed into sweats, and climbed into bed. That was when I heard it. A dull thump, then a faint rustling. At first I thought it was coming from outside, but when I sat up and listened, I realized the noise was inside the wall. My house only had 2 bedrooms. It wasn't big. There weren't many places for a sound like that to hide. I pressed my ear against the wall. Something moved on the other side. I knocked once. Everything stopped. My first thought was mice. Then, raccoons. Something had gotten into the wall or the crawl space under the house. It was unsettling, but still explainable. I stepped into the living room to grab my phone, and as I passed the front window, I looked outside. The white van was back. Same spot across the street. Only this time, I didn't see anyone inside. I don't know what made me do it, but I opened the front door and stepped onto the porch. The night was cool and still. The van sat there with its engine off, windows black, completely silent, 2 nights in a row. That was when I knew something was wrong. I went back inside, grabbed the small flashlight from the kitchen drawer, and went out the side door. I wanted to check around the house for gaps where an animal could have gotten in. Barefoot, with cold grass under my feet, I made my way along the siding. Then I saw it. The crawl space door was cracked open. The small padlock that was supposed to keep it shut was hanging broken against the frame. I hadn't looked at that door in weeks. I pulled it open a little more and aimed my weak flashlight into the black space beneath the house. The beam barely reached anything. I leaned closer, squinting into the darkness. At first, I heard tiny sounds, pebbles shifting, dust scraping. Then the sound changed. It became heavier, more deliberate, not an animal crawling. Footsteps, slow, crouched footsteps moving toward me from under my own house. Then, just barely, I saw the shape of a person duck walking toward the opening. I slammed the crawl space door so hard the frame shook. My hand grabbed for the knob, but the lock was broken and the latch did nothing. The door pushed back against my palm from the other side. Someone was under my house. Someone had been under my house. I ran inside, locked the door, and called the police. My voice sounded calm at first, only because my brain hadn't caught up with what I'd just seen. While I was on the phone, everything from the night before clicked into place. The scraping sound, the van, noises in the wall. It hadn't been an animal. It had never been an animal. The dispatcher told me to stay inside, keep away from windows, and wait for officers. I moved into the hallway where I could see the front window without standing directly in front of it. The white van was gone. No headlights, no engine, no movement. Just an empty road where it had been sitting minutes earlier. When the police arrived, I showed them the crawl space door. I stood in the yard trying not to shake. A few minutes later, one officer called me over. In the far left corner of the crawl space, the ceiling boards had been cut into. Not all the way through, but enough to show intent. The marks were rough and uneven, like someone had been sawing trying to make an opening into the house from below. That was the part that stayed with me. Not that someone had broken in, that someone had planned to come up through the floor while I slept. I couldn't give the police much. A white van, dark windows, maybe one person inside. No plate number, no face, no cameras on the house or street. They searched the area, but they didn't find anyone. That night, I didn't sleep in the house. I drove to a motel and stayed there with every light on. Maya came back the next morning. She wanted to sell the place immediately. I didn't blame her. We repaired the crawl space, installed cameras, added motion lights, and changed every lock. The van never came back. For a while, I told myself that was the end of it. But fear has a strange way of changing shape. It doesn't always disappear. Sometimes it waits until you're far away from where it started. A few months later, I decided to get out of town. My family owned a small cabin near a national forest in Colorado. It sat alone at the end of an old dirt road, surrounded by pine trees and steep hills. We used it mostly in summer, and I had been there dozens of times with my parents when I was younger. I had gone alone before, too, usually for hunting, hiking, and clearing my head. So that weekend, I packed my truck and drove nearly 7 hours into the mountains. The cabin wasn't fancy, just a modest wooden place with a front deck, 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, and big windows facing the trees. There was no real driveway. You pulled off the dirt road and parked in the grass. I arrived late in the afternoon. The sun was dropping behind the tree line, and the air had that cold mountain smell even though it was summer. I let myself in using the keypad lock, turned on the electricity, got the water heater running, and carried in my bags. The place had been empty for a while. I threw away old mouse traps, swept dead bugs from the corners, and opened a few windows. Then I ate the sandwich I'd brought and started organizing the hunting gear my dad and I kept in a storage closet. That was when I heard laughter outside, children laughing. I froze in the kitchen, one hand still on the closet door. At first, I thought the sound had come from a bird or my phone. But then it came again, a group of kids laughing somewhere behind the cabin. I walked into the living room and looked through the big back window. The woods were dim, full of long shadows. I didn't see anyone. I opened the heavy window and listened. There it was again. Light, playful laughter echoing from the forest. It irritated me more than it scared me. This was private property. If kids were out there, they were trespassing, probably messing around because they thought nobody was there. I stepped out the back door and called, "You need to leave. This is private land." The laughter continued. Not closer, not farther, just somewhere out there. I walked into the trees, trying to follow the sound, but every time I moved toward it, it seemed to stay the same distance away. After 10 minutes, I gave up and went back inside. That night, I locked the cabin and slept badly. The next morning, I climbed into the old hunting tower my dad had built years earlier. I had barely settled in when I heard the same children laughing again from deeper in the woods. Same sound, same distance, same eerie rhythm. I called my dad and told him someone was on the property. He told me to chase them off if I saw them. I didn't see anyone, but I wanted the noise to stop. So I aimed my rifle safely into the air and fired one round. The laughter stopped immediately. The forest went silent. Wait! I stayed in the hunting tower for another 20 minutes, but the mood was ruined. The silence felt worse than the laughter. I climbed down and headed back to the cabin. By the time I got there, my head was pounding. Maybe it was the elevation, stress, or simply too little sleep. I made dinner, drank water, and tried to convince myself that some bored kids had been playing in the woods and nothing more. That night, I left a few windows open to let cool air move through the cabin. The fresh air helped a little, but I still couldn't relax. Sometime after 11, the laughter came back. I sat up in bed so fast, the blanket slid off me. Outside, laughing in the dark, only now it sounded closer. I climbed out of bed and looked through the window, but the forest was black. I couldn't see anything beyond a few pale tree trunks. That was when anger took over. I had been followed by a stranger in my own town. I had run once already, and I hated how small that made me feel. So I grabbed my rifle from the closet and a flashlight from the kitchen. I wasn't planning to hurt anyone. I just wanted whoever was out there to understand that I wasn't helpless. I stepped out the back door. The laughter came from straight ahead, maybe 20 yards into the woods. It was much louder than before. Too loud. "Get off my land," I shouted. The laughter kept going. I swept the flashlight beam between the trees. The light wasn't strong enough to reach far, but it caught bark, branches, rocks, and nothing else. Then the laughter exploded. It went from distant and playful to deafening in half a second. So loud it felt like it was inside my skull. Something hit the ground beside me. I jumped back and aimed the flashlight down. It was an old portable speaker, scuffed and muddy, lying in the leaves. The sound of children laughing blasted from it at full volume. For a moment, I couldn't move. Then I understood. There were no children. Someone had been using the speaker to lure me into the woods. I picked it up and threw it as hard as I could back into the darkness. It crashed somewhere between the trees, but the laughing didn't stop right away. It crackled, distorted, and kept playing. I raised the flashlight again. At the edge of the beam, I saw a person standing between two pines. At least, I think I did. A tall shape. Still, watching. My hands went cold. I aimed the rifle into the air and fired. The gunshot cracked through the forest, and the laughter cut out completely. "Come any closer," I shouted, barely recognizing my own voice. "And the next one won't go into the sky." Then I ran. I slammed the back door, locked it, closed every curtain, and moved through the cabin, shutting every window. I thought about calling the sheriff, but the nearest station was far away. Out there, a phone call felt less like rescue and more like waiting. So, I packed. I shoved clothes, my wallet, keys, and charger into my bag. I kept the rifle close. I was halfway through the living room when something smeared across the big window facing the woods. A wet, slow streak dragged over the glass from outside. I stood frozen. Then another streak crossed it. In red. I waited without breathing. After a minute, I moved just enough to peek through the side of the curtain. There were words written on the window, written in blood, or something that looked exactly like it. I didn't read them. I didn't want them in my head. I grabbed my bag, punched the code into the front door lock with shaking fingers, and ran for my truck. I got in, started the engine, and threw it into drive before the startup beeps finished. I called my dad on the way down the mountain. He told me I was right to leave, that nothing there was worth my life. I stopped at a motel in the nearest town and stayed there until morning. My dad drove up the next day, and I met him at the cabin around noon. The words on the window were gone. The door hadn't been forced. Nothing inside had been taken. We searched the trees and found no speaker, no reliable footprints, nothing. We stayed together for 2 nights after that. Nothing happened, but I never felt alone in those woods again. After the cabin incident, I stopped trusting silence. I stopped trusting empty roads, parked cars, dark windows, and sounds that seemed easy to explain. A year later, when my sister moved away for good, I rented the old house out and moved into a smaller place closer to town. I thought being near people would help. It did for a while. Then my younger cousin, Eli, came to stay with me for a weekend. He was 14, just starting high school, and excited that his parents had finally trusted him enough to be away from home without constant supervision. I promised my aunt I'd keep an eye on him. On Saturday night, I let him meet a couple of friends nearby. It was only a short walk, and he was supposed to be home by 10. He came back after 11, and he was running.